Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have a wonderful show today. The readers will read their favorite poems. The marvelous readers in order of their appearance are Garrett M. Brown, Courteney Bailey, Rian Bailey, Diane Schurr, Marie Pal Brown, Elizabeth Iannaci, me, Harry Northup. Here's Garrett M. Brown.
Thanks, Harry. This first poem I want to dedicate to my mother's memory. She was born on Robert Frost's birthday, which is tomorrow, March 26th. And this is The Pasture by Robert Frost. I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear. I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by its mother. It's so young it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too. This next poem, we had a tradition in our family at Christmas time, reading material that was meaningful about Christmas. My daughter hated the event until I found this poem by Judith Vorst called The Thank You Note. I wanted small, pierced earrings, gold. You gave me slippers, gray. My mother said that she would scold unless I wrote to say how much I like them. Not much. This next one is by Frank O'Hara. The man who mentored me as a painter, Fairfield Porter, did a wonderful portrait of Frank O'Hara. And this poem combines both my love of writing and painting. It's called Why I'm Not a Painter by Frank O'Hara. I'm not a painter, I'm a poet. Why? I think I would rather be a painter, but I am not. Well, for instance, Mike Goldberg is starting a painting. I drop in. Sit down, have a drink, he says. I drink, we drink. I look up. Oh, you have sardines in it. Yes, it needed something there. Oh, I go and the days go by. And I drop in again. The painting is going on, and I go, and the days go by. I drop in. The painting is finished. Where's sardines? All that's left is just letters. It was too much, Mike says. But me, one day, I'm thinking of a color, orange. Pretty soon it is a whole page of words, not lines. Then another page. There should be so much more. Not of orange, of words, how terrible orange is, and life. Days go by. It is even in prose. I am a real poet. My poem is finished, and I haven't mentioned orange yet. It's 12 poems. I call it Oranges. And one day in a gallery, I see Mike's painting called Sardines. This next one is called The Russian by Robert Bly. The Russians had few doctors on the front line. My father's job was this. After the battle was over, he'd walk among the men that were hit, sit down and ask, would you like to die on your own in a few hours, or should I finish it? Most said, don't leave me. The two would have a cigarette. He'd take out his small notebook. We had no dog tags, and write the man's name down, his wife's, his children, his address, and what he wanted to say. When the cigarette was done, the soldier would turn his head to the side. My father finished off 400 men that way during the war. He never went crazy. They were his people. He came to Toronto. My father in the summers would stand on the lawn with a hose watering the grass that way. It took a long time. He'd talk to the moon, to the wind. I can hear you growing, he'd say to the grass. We come and go. We're no different from each other. We are all part of something. We have a home. When I was 13, I said, Dad, do you know they've invented sprinklers now? He went on watering the grass. This is my life. Just shut up if you don't understand it. And then from Stanley Kunitz, The Longboat. When his boat snapped loose from its moorings under the shrieking of the gulls, he tried at first to wave to his dear ones on shore, but in the rolling fog, they had already lost their faces. Too tired even to choose between jumping and calling, somehow he felt absolved and free of his burdens, those mottos stamped on his name tag: conscience, ambition, and all that caring. He was content to lie down with the family ghosts in the slop of his cradle, buffeted by the storm, endlessly drifting. Peace. Peace. To be rocked by the infinite, as if it didn't matter which way was home, as if he didn't know he loved the earth so much he wanted to stay forever. And then finally, this from Charles Wright, one of my favorite poets. It's called Bedtime Story. And in honor of an homage to Charles Wright, who's a Southerner, I'm going to give it a little bit of his voice. I've heard him, and I just love the way he renders it. Bedtime Story by Charles Wright. The generator hums like a distant ding on sitch. It's early evening, and time, like the dog it is hungry for food. And will be fed. Don't doubt it. Will be fed, my small one. The forest begins to gather its silences in. The meadow regroups and hunkers down for its cleft feet. Something is wringing the rag of sunlight inexorably out and hanging. Something is making the reeds bend and cover their heads. Something is licking the shadows up and stringing the blank spaces along, filling them in. Something is inching its way into our hearts, scratching its blue nails against the wall there. Should we let it in? Should we greet it as it deserves? Hands on our ears, mouths open? Or should we bring it a chair to sit on and offer it meat? Should we turn on the radio? Should we clap our hands and dance the something dance? The welcoming something dance? I think we should, love. I think we should. Thank you, Harry. And now let me introduce to you all Courteney and Rian Bailey.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, as always, with Harry. So I believe there's my daughter, Marijane, who's been on the show before, and she's going to kick this off and read a poem. So Rian, why don't you tell us the name of the poem and the author and get going, girl.
Okay, it's called The Land of Nod by Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, can I read it?
Please do.
From breakfast on through all the day, at home among my friends I stay. But every night I go abroad, afar into the land of Nod. All by myself I have to go, with none to tell me what to do. All alone beside the streams, and up the mountainsides of dreams. The strangest things are there for me, both things to eat and things to see. And many frightening sights abroad, to morning in the land of Nod. Try as I like to find my way, I can never get back by day, nor can remember plain and clear the curious music that I hear.
Beautiful. Great job, Rai. All right. And now I've selected some poems for those who know me or have heard me speak even for a couple of minutes. I'm a big UCLA fan, and my husband and I met there, and we were both student athletes there. So Coach John Wooden is a important person in our lives, and he was a huge fan of poetry. And I've picked some of his favorite poems for my selection today. One of them is actually by a UCLA basketball alum. So this first one is called How to Be a Champion by Grantland Rice. You wonder how they do it. You look to see the knack. You watch the foot in action, or the shoulder, or the back. But when you spot the answer where the higher glamours lurk, you'll find in moving higher up the laurel-covered spire that most of it is practice and the rest of it is work. The next one that I've selected, which I think is really beautiful and even speaks about spring, is called Shut the Door on Yesterday by Vivian Yeiser Larimore. I have shut the door on yesterday, its sorrows and mistakes. I have locked within its gloomy walls past failures and mistakes. And now I throw the key away and seek another room and furnish it with hope and smiles and every springtime bloom. No thought shall enter this abode that has a taint of pain, and envy, malice, and distrust shall never entrance again. I have shut the door on yesterday and thrown the key away. Tomorrow holds no fear for me, since I have found today. The next one is by a UCLA men's basketball alum who is quite an accomplished writer and very thoughtful. His name is Swen Nader, who played for Coach Wooden. And this is called After You Know It All. Beyond the festive caps and gowns, beyond the PhDs, beyond the books that filled the minds of those who earned degrees, a greater knowledge will commence for those who heed the call. What counts the most is what you learn after you know it all. All graduated pedagogues, when teaching, find in turn those books on what to teach had failed to show how children learn. And they will soon discover that each child who owns a name is different and unique. And so they all don't learn the same. The classroom coach who learned the boys, our X's and O's, become adept at leadership. The moment that he knows those boys need teacher shepherds who will guide their little lambs to execute the truths of life beyond the diagrams. Oh, decorated graduate, once past that college wall, what counts most is what you learn after you know it all. And the last one I have here is called At Day's End. And this is by John Hall. Is anybody happier because you passed his way? Does anybody remember that you spoke to him today? The day is almost over and its toiling time is through. Is there anyone to utter now a kindly word of you? Can you say tonight, in parting with the day that is slipping fast, that you helped a single brother of the many you passed? Is a single heart rejoicing over what you did or said? Does the man whose hopes were fading now with courage look? Did you waste the day or lose it? Was it well or sorely spent? Did you leave a trail of kindness or a scar of discontent? As you close your eyes in slumber, do you think God will say, you have earned one more tomorrow by the work you did today? And now I would like to pass it to a very incredible woman who is an American icon truly in the world of music and jazz, and a person with an incredibly big heart. So I would like to pass it to Miss Diane Schurr, better known as Deeds.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm welling up here a little bit, but that's okay. I'm Deeds and Diane Schurr, and I'd like to read. All right, get together, girlfriend. Two passages from a wonderful book called The Prophet, written by Khalil Gibran. I just love this book. And I think it's very profound, the words that I'm about to speak, or maybe channel, okay? And it's the first one is about crime and punishment. Then one of the judges of the city stood forth and said, "Speak to us of crime and punishment." And he answered, saying, "It is when your spirit goes wandering upon the wind that you, alone and unguarded, commit a wrong unto others and therefore unto yourself. And for that wrong committed must you knock and wait a while, unheeded at the gate of the blessed. Like the ocean is your God self. It remains forever undefiled, and like the ether it lifts but the winged. Even like the sun is your God self. It knows not the ways of the mole, nor seeks it the holes of the serpent. But your God self dwells not alone in your being. Much in you is still man, and much in you is not yet man, but a shapeless pygmy that walks asleep in the mist, searching for its own awakening. And of the man in you would I now speak, for it is he, and not your God self, nor the pygmy in the mist that knows crime and the punishment of crime. Oftentimes have I heard you speak of one who commits a wrong as though he were not one of you, but a stranger unto you and an intruder upon your world. But I say that even as the holy and the righteous cannot rise beyond the highest, which is in each one of you, so the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest, which is in you also. And as a single leaf turns not yellow, but with the silent knowledge of the whole tree, so the wrongdoer cannot do wrong without the hidden will of you all. Like a procession, you walk together towards your God self. You are the way and the wayfarers. And when one of you falls down, he falls for those behind him, a caution against the stumbling stone. Aye, and he falls for those ahead of him, who though faster and surer of foot, yet remove not the stumbling stone. And this also, though the word lie heavy upon your hearts, the murdered is not unaccountable for his own murder, and the robbed is not blameless in being robbed. The righteous is not innocent of the deeds of the wicked, and the white-handed is not clean in the doings of the felon. Yea, the guilty is oftentimes the victim of the injured, and still often the condemned is the burden bearer for the guiltless and unblamed. You cannot separate the just from the unjust and the good from the wicked, for they stand together before the face of the sun, even as the black thread and the white are woven together. And when the black thread breaks, the weaver shall look into the whole cloth, and he shall examine the loom also. If any of you would bring to judgment the unfaithful wife, let him also weigh the heart of her husband in scales and measure his soul with measurements. And let him who would lash the offender look unto the spirit of the offended. And if any of you would punish in the name of righteousness and lay the axe unto the evil tree, let him see to its roots, and verily he will find the roots of the good and the bad, the fruitful and the fruitless, all entwined together in the silent heart of the earth. And you judges who would be just, what judgment pronounce you upon him who, though honest in the flesh, yet is a thief in spirit? What penalty lay you upon him who slays in the flesh, yet is himself slain in the spirit? And how prosecute you him who in action is a deceiver and an oppressor, yet who also is aggrieved and outraged? And how shall you punish those whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds? Is not remorse the justice which is administered by that very law which you would fain serve? Yet you cannot lay remorse upon the innocent, nor lift it from the heart of the guilty. Unbidden shall it call in the night, that men may wake and gaze upon themselves. And you who would understand justice, how shall you, unless you look upon all deeds in the fullness of light? Only then shall you know that the erect and the fallen are but one man standing in twilight between the night of his pygmy self and the day of his God self. And that the cornerstone of the temple is not higher than the lowest stone in its foundation. Then a lawyer said, "But what of our laws, master?" And he answered, "You delight in laying down laws, yet you delight more in breaking them." Like children playing by the ocean, who build sand towers with constancy and then destroy them with laughter. But while you build your sand towers, the ocean brings more sand to the shore. And when you destroy them, the ocean laughs with you. Verily, the ocean laughs always with the innocent. But what of those to whom life is not an ocean, and man-made laws are not sand towers, but to whom life is a rock, and the law a chisel with which they would carve it in their own likeness? What of the cripple who hates dancers? What of the ox who loves his yoke and deems the elk and deer of the forest stray and vagrant things? What of the old serpent who cannot shed his skin and calls all others naked and shameless? And of him who comes early to the wedding feast, and when overfed and tired goes his way, saying that all feasts are violation and all feasters lawbreakers? What shall I say of these, save that they too stand in the sunlight, but with their backs to the sun? They see only their shadows, and their shadows are their laws. And what is the sun to them but a caster of shadows? And what is it to acknowledge the laws but to stoop down and trace their shadows upon the earth? But you who walk facing the sun, what images drawn on the earth can hold you? You who travel with the wind, what weather vane shall direct your course? What man's law shall bind you if you break your yoke, but upon no man's prison door? What laws shall you fear if you dance, but stumble against no man's iron chains? And who is he that shall bring you to judgment if you tear off your garment, yet leave it in no man's path? People of Orphalese, you can muffle the drum and you can loosen the strings of the lyre, but who shall command the skylark not to sing? Thank you so much for letting me read. And now I would like to introduce you to Maureen Powell Brown. Thank you, Harry, for letting me read too. God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you, Deeds, and thank you, Harry, for inviting me to participate in this reading. I will be reading 4 poems. Welcome Morning by Anne Sexton. There is joy in all, in the hair I brush each morning, in the cannon towel newly washed that I rub my body with each morning, in the chapel of eggs I cook each morning, in the outcry from the kettle that heats my coffee each morning, in the spoon and the chair that cry, "Hello there, Anne," each morning, in the Godhead of the table that I set my silver plate cup upon each morning. All this is God, right here in my pea green house each morning. And I mean, though often forget to give thanks, to faint down by the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing, as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriages of seeds. So while I think of it, let me paint a thank you on my palm for this God, for this laughter of the morning, lest it go unspoken. For the joy that isn't shared, I've heard, dies young. Next, I will read the first Rilke poem I ever encountered, and although it isn't as transcendent as his later work, I've remained very fond of it. Herbsttag. Herr, es ist Zeit. Der Sommer war sehr groß. Leg deinen Schatten auf die Sonnenuhren und auf den Fluren lass die Winde los. Befiehl den letzten Früchten voll zu sein, gib ihnen noch 2 südlichere Tage, dränge sie zur Vollendung hin und jage die letzte Süße in den schweren Wein. Wer jetzt kein Haus hat, baut sich keines mehr. Wer jetzt allein ist, wird es lange bleiben, wird wachen, lesen, lange Briefe schreiben und wird in den Alleen hin und her unruhig wandern, wenn die Blätter treiben. And this translation by Stephen Mitchell. Autumn Day. Lord, it is time. The huge summer has gone by. Now overlap the sundials with your shadows, and on the meadows let the wind go free. Command the fruits to swell on tree and vine, grant them a few more warm, transparent days. Urge them on to fulfillment then, and press the final sweetness into the heavy wine. Whoever has no house now will never have one. Whoever is alone will stay alone, will sit, read, write long letters through the evening, and wander on the boulevards up and down restlessly while the dry leaves are blowing. A piece by Kabir rendered by Robert Bly. Friend, hope for the guest while you're alive. Jump into experience while you are alive. Think and think while you are alive. What you call salvation belongs to the time before death. The idea that the soul will join with the ecstatic just because the body is rotten, that is all fantasy. What is found now is found then. If you find nothing now, you will simply end up in an apartment in the city of death. If you make love to the divine now, in the next life, you will have the face of satisfied desire. So plunge into the truth. Find out who the teacher is. Believe in the great sound. Kabir says this: when the guest is being searched for, it is the intensity of the longing for the guest that does all the work. Look at me, and you will see a slave of that intensity. My last poem I would like to read in memory of Father Francis Benedict. When Great Trees Fall, by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed, they existed. We can be, and be better, for they existed. Thank you. And I would like to introduce Elizabeth Iannaci as the next reader.
It's been such a joy to listen to these poems. Some are new to me, some I'm really familiar with, but and also a thrill to hear the Rilke in its original German, which was absolutely stunning. I'm going to read a few poems. Most of my favorite poems are much too long for this particular reading, but I'm going to read you an excerpt from Dylan Thomas's. It's just a very short "In My Craft or Sullen Art." And quite often poets are asked why we write or what we write for. And Dylan Thomas says, "Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spindrift pages, not for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art." And along those same lines, James Tate has a wonderful poem called "Teaching the Ape to Write Poems," just in case we ever get too puffed up. "Teaching the Ape to Write Poems" by James Tate. They didn't have much trouble teaching the ape to write poems. First, they strapped him into the chair, then tied the pencil around his hand. The paper had already been nailed down. Then Dr. Bluespire leaned over his shoulder and whispered into his ear, "You look like a god sitting there. Why don't you try to write something?" And one of my favorite poets is Carol Ann Duffy, who was the first and only female poet laureate in 400 years of the UK. And this is from her wonderful collection called The World's Wife. This is Mrs. Midas. It was late September. I'd just poured a glass of wine, begun to unwind while the vegetables cooked, the kitchen filled with the smell of itself, relaxed its steamy breath, gently blanching the windows. So I opened one, then with my fingers wiped the other's glass like a brow. He was standing under the pear tree, snapping a twig. Now the garden was long and the visibility poor, the way the dark of the ground seems to drink the light of the sky. But that twig in his hand was gold. And then he plucked a pear from a branch. We grew fondante d'automne, and it sat in his palm like a light bulb on. I thought to myself, is he putting fairy lights in the tree? He came into the house. The doorknobs gleamed. He drew the blinds. You know the mind. I thought of the field of the cloth of gold in Miss Macready. He sat in that chair like a king on a burnished throne. The look on his face was strange, wild, vain. I said, what in the name of God is going on? He started to laugh. I served up the meal. For starters, corn on the cob. Within seconds, he was spitting out the teeth of the rich. He toyed with his spoon, then mine, then with the knives, the forks. He asked, where was the wine? I poured with a shaking hand a fragrant bone-dry white from Italy, then watched as he picked up the glass, goblet, golden chalice, drank. It was then that I started to scream. He sank to his knees. After we'd both calmed down, I finished the wine on my own, hearing him out. I made him sit on the other side of the room and keep his hands to himself. I locked the cat in the cellar. I moved the phone, the toilet. I didn't mind. I couldn't believe my ears, how he'd had a wish. Look, we all have wishes, granted, but who has wishes granted? Him. Do you know about gold? It feeds no one. Aurum, soft, untarnishable, slakes no thirst. He tried to light a cigarette. I gazed entranced at the blue flame played on its lustrous stem. At least, I said, you'll be able to give up smoking for good. Separate beds. In fact, I put a chair against my door, near petrified. He was below, turning the spare room into the tomb of Tutankhamun. You see, we were passionate then, in those halcyon days, unwrapping each other rapidly, like presents, fast food. But now I feared his honeyed embrace, the kiss that would turn my lips into a work of art. And who, when it comes to the crunch, can live with a heart of gold? That night I dreamt I bore his child, its perfect or limbs, its little tongue like a precious latch, its amber eyes holding their pupils like flies. My dream milk burned in my breasts. I woke to the streaming sun. So he had to move out. We had a caravan in the wilds, in a glade of its own. I drove him up under the cover of dark. He sat in the back, and then I came home, the woman who married the fool who wished for gold. At first, I visited odd times, parking the car a good way off, then walking. You knew you were getting close, golden trout on the grass. One day, a hare hung from a latch, a beautiful lemon mistake. And then his footprints glistening next to the river's past. He was thin, delirious. Hearing, he said, the music of Pan from the woods. Listen, that was the last straw. What gets me now is not the idiocy or greed, but lack of thought for me. Pure selfishness. I sold the contents of the house and came down here. I think of him in certain lights, dawn, late afternoon. And once a bowl of apples stopped me dead. I miss most, even now, his hands, his warm hands, on my skin, his touch. And I have so many more poems to read you, but I'm going to read you one more by the wonderful Ellen Bass. This is at gate C22. It's from her book, The Human Line. At gate C22 in the Portland airport, a man in a broadband leather hat kissed a woman arriving from Orange County. They kissed and kissed and kissed long after the other passengers clicked the handles of their carry-ons and wheeled briskly toward short-term parking. The couple stood there, arms wrapped around each other like he'd just staggered off the boat at Ellis Island, like she'd been released at last from ICU, snapped out of a coma, survived bone cancer, made it down from Annapurna in only the clothes she was wearing. Neither of them was young. His beard was gray. She carried a few extra pounds. You could imagine her saying she had to lose, but they kissed lavish kisses like the ocean in the early morning, the way it gathers and swells, sucking each rock under, swallowing it again and again. We were all watching, passengers waiting for the delayed flight to San Jose, the stewardesses, the pilots, the aproned woman icing Cinnabons, the man selling sunglasses. We couldn't look away. We could taste the kisses crushed in our mouths, but the best part was his face when he drew back and looked at her, his smile soft with wonder, almost as though he were a mother still open from giving birth, as your mother must have looked at you, no matter what happened after, if she beat you or left you or you're lonely now. You once lay there, the Vernus not yet wiped off, and someone gazed at you as if you were the first sunrise seen from the earth. The whole wing of the airport hushed, all of us trying to slip into that woman's middle-aged body, her plaid Bermuda shorts, sleeveless blouse, glasses, little gold hoop earrings, tilting our heads up. So I think I'm out of time, but I want to, my very most favorite poem in the world is by B.H. Fairchild, and it's called Body and Soul. It's from his collection called The Art of the Lathe, and you should do yourself a favor and look it up. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's an extraordinary pleasure for me to introduce our next reader, who is the inimitable Harry Northup, also known as our fearless leader. Harry, over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to read 4 poems from The Weathercock by Anne Stanford, who was my teacher. She taught me verse and structural grammar at Northridge, where I got my BA in English. She was born in 1916 and died in 1987. The Messenger. I don't deny that I believe in ghosts, myself being one. No, not the ultimate lost spirit, I mean, but this, a messenger, soft, soft, last night, half falling into sleep. I rose like smoke, up, curving past the window, floating, a gray cloud, seaward, slow and pale. And then the wings. Did you hear the birds piling against your window? A snow of wings, crowding and gentle, crying over and over, each with a single errand, light cannot bring, nor ever my tongue would say. Archaic doves, rustling your sleep and calling, crowding upon you, drifting and crying, love. Pandora. Never again the house new as youth or youth precise, on the fresh leaves of hay in the field, and the tree bark shimmers black and white only after rain. The day rose clear-faced and quick, breathing lemon and sage, undoubtedly crystal. Fog was for coolness, not to get lost in, and the wicked road to ominous music. The box had been left, but I never suddenly opened the lid. The day hung so full, time being happy and short. No reason to fret over a dusty chest in a corner. And I had given my word. But nothing is changeless. While it was there in the house, something crept out. Buzzing and small. I heard it at night, an insect whine in the air, unseen in the light. And the mornings were sad sometimes and rising slow, and the day crumbled and worn, like a picture handled too much, and I, indifferent, came here outlasting the dawn between me and the fields, the horizon too close, and bright days were full of objects not noticed before. Love broke to a trinity. There were too many paths. None seemed to be true. And in the oat fields, the horsemen wore various guises, and which could I trust on their spotted geldings? I have heard of such things, but not for myself, and the silver sifts from the box on my hair and my tears, and the owner is gone, and I shall never be rid of it. The Sleeping Princess. I don't remember when I fell asleep, half up the stair, or dropped from a summer hill, or yawning into bedtime. But the dream so counterfeited me, I could not tell I was asleep. For in that sleep, the sun shone on my eyes. I rose and breathed the day, widened the doors, ran to the summer lawn, and spent the seasons prodigal as snow. Still, I was careful. There the sleeper lay. I took such journeys as were possible. My diary was complete, and it could show much was accomplished, and the days turned full. And yet it was not real. I find the book dusty, unwritten in, for someone called and touched my cheek. The spendthrift years were done. Was it a kiss? I woke, and I was old. And the last poem of Anne Stanford that I will read today is The White Horse. Where is the white horse? I asked the toyin and the walnuts. The toyin was flowing. The walnuts lifted their leaves lightly like feathers. They were tossing and flowering, and the wind rustled a little. It was dark there under the trees. I tried the meadow. Where is the white horse? I asked the mustard and ryegrass. Have you seen her? The mustard was yellow and the rye going to seed. I could tell the old horse had been there. She had left her mementos. Where is the white horse? I asked the toys down by the corral. They looked at me sideways. One had already drowned in the water trough. The birds had little to say. The corral was deserted. I walked past the toyin and walnuts and over the meadow and up the hill. I knew the white horse had been there. She's lame, I said. She can't go far. And I went up the road to the nearest stable. There was only a black horse and a brown one. They tossed their manes in the wind and kicked their heels a little. Where is the white horse? I said. She was here yesterday. Thank you. Garrett, Marie, Elizabeth, why don't you all come on the screen and we'll talk about the reading. Deeds and Courteney and Rian, they have left, but we're here, and let's just talk a little bit about the poetry, or if you like, talk about two of the poets that you chose and why you chose that particular poet. Garrett, before we do that, I just want to say to all of you and to the ones who have departed because they had other business to take care of, thank you all for a joyful, sagacious, loving, and inspirational reading. You know, the poets that you chose to read, from Robert Frost to Stanley Kunitz, Grantland Rice, Rilke, Cahill Gibran, Dylan Thomas, you know, they're all great poets among others. And so what a fabulous choice that each one of you made. So Garrett, what would you like to say about the reading or a poet that you chose?
Yeah, no, here, I just wanted to salute you. You're such a champion for poetry and writers, and it's such a treat to be a part of this always. But yeah, and I think I joined Elizabeth with this whole, you know, it was so hard to choose. There's so many, it was so nice to revisit a lot of these poets that I hadn't read for a while, you know, and I love being reignited with them and reunited. But yeah, so it's, I don't know, Harry, what specific, do you have a specific question or anything? Because I could go on and on.
I'll ask you one. Why did you choose Robert Frost, for example?
Well, tomorrow is his birthday, and it joins my mother's birthday, and she was the one who I think first introduced me to Robert Frost, Carolyn Louise Williamson Brown, and she was an avid lover of poetry. In fact, my father, it's interesting, he was a lover of Robert Service. The Cremation of Sam McGee was one of his favorite poems. The poem that I actually wanted to read, but it's too long, was The Hired Man by Robert Frost. And it's really a long piece, and I love that piece. But I just figured I'd do some short pieces, and then I'd get into a few more longer pieces. And the Russian by Bly, there's so many poems of his that I enjoy, but that comes from Morning Poems, which I love that collection because a friend of his had just suggested, why don't you just get up every morning and write a poem? And so that's what he did for, I think, a year or something. And out of this came some wonderful poems. And that one, I just thought, I don't know, I reread it and I thought, oh man, with what's going on right now in the world, it kind of touched me. So, yeah, so that's my story.
Marie.
Move a little closer to the computer. I have to share. Well, as you know, I'm a lover of Rilke, and so I will just say a few words about him. You've noticed I have an accent, and it's a German accent. So the reason why Rilke speaks to me as much as he does is, number one, because he speaks my language, my native tongue. And no matter how long I've been in this country, how well I speak this language, it doesn't touch me. English doesn't touch me in the same way. It really gets to the root of who I am, you know, as the language that was sung at my cradle. Secondly, I love his, I've always loved this particular poem. I probably ran across it, 40 years ago. And it sort of speaks, it didn't speak to me then in the way it speaks to me now, in that it is, well, for me, it's really winter time, not autumn day, or at this stage of my life. And so it addresses, you know, in beautiful language that doesn't really quite come across in English, I'm afraid. even though Stephen Mitchell is an excellent translator, he's the best of the Rilke translators, in my opinion. So yes, so as I said in the introduction of the Rilke poem, this poem is not nearly as transcendent as his later works, like the Duino elegies and Orpheus sonnets. But I love it a lot.
Thank you, Marie. And Elizabeth, we have about 30 seconds. What would you like to say briefly?
Oh, just Carol Ann Duffy. I was a new poet when I came across this particular collection, and the idea of the persona poem, and she writes from such a place of authority and compassion that all of the wives in this collection, Freud's wife and Mrs. King Kong, and it was just so creative. It has always inspired my work, and I love the persona poem.
Well, thank you once again, Garrett M. Brown, Marie Powell Brown, Courteney Bailey, Rian Bailey, Diane Deedles, Schurr, Elizabeth Iannaci. Next Tuesday, we have two wonderful poets with us, Kim Dower and Lester Graves Lennon. And here's our wonderful host and director, Allegra Leedom, to take us home. Thank you.